What's up, guys? Welcome back to Classic Octane. I am Taylor. Today we are on the Barn to Brat project again. The name of the game today is going to be charging system. So I did a little bit of diagnostics earlier, and I needed to order some parts and got them all in. So let's dive into it and I'll show you guys what I found. So before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to the guys over at NewAir. That's where this fan is from. They saw me out here sweating in the Texas heat and trying to get by with this terrible old box fan. So they sent over one of these wall mount fans. I put it up right there for now because it kind of is at an angle, and basically when the car is in here, I can still work at my workbench and have like solid airflow all the way through. So they hooked me up with a fan, which is really awesome. They're also going to hook you guys up if you are interested. You can follow the link in the description, get 15% off. Just use the promo code Octane and go check it out. So far so good. I'm loving it, and I'm glad to get one more thing off of my terribly dirty workbench. So I was running through the tests for the charging system the last time I had the bike all put together. Basically, if you remember last time when I was running the bike, I tested across the battery. At idle, I should be getting at least 12 volts, which it started at 12 because that's what the battery was out, and then gradually got down all the way to about 6, and the bike was about to shut off. So that means the charging system wasn't working at all. The bike should be able to stay idling, no problem with the charging system, and then ramp up to like 2500 plus RPMs. You should be up close to 14 volts. So we were getting 0 increase in voltage with RPM, and like I said, the battery was drained all the way down to about 6 volts before I turned it off. So I was going through all the testing for like the field coil and the stator coil, and everything checked out all right. Our resistance was a little bit high. Basically, you can kind of go from each of the 3 yellow wires that run down to the stator, check the resistance, and you should get between 4.6 and 5 ohms. I was a little bit higher than that, somewhere around like 7 or 8 ohms. So that was kind of the first thing, but the real killer was when I went from the yellow wires to a known good ground. And you should not have any continuity between your stator wires and ground, and all of mine were grounded out. So I decided to pull the cover off, look into the stator a little bit more, and it only got worse from there. So let me pull these off and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So to get to the stator, we just got to pull these side covers off. So we're going to start with the shifter. It's just a 10mm bolt. We can pull the shifter off. Then there's these, I'm going to call them Phillips. I know technically they're not Phillips, but around the outside of this cover, that's how you can also get to the sprocket, which we'll need to get to change our chain over, but we can worry about that later. 2 10mm bolts on the top of the starter cover, and then that'll give us access to the wiring. To get to the stator itself, there's just 4. Mine are Allen heads. I don't think they're Allens from the factory, to pull that off, and then this whole side cover will come off as well. Alright, so I already have my wires undone from when I had this apart before, but here's what I found. So basically, one problem that led into a much larger problem. So the small problem, well, okay, the first problem, there should be 3 bolts that go through here that keep this stator winding from moving. Those are non-existent, meaning it was allowing this stator winding to move too much, which, if you can see up here, ripped 2 out of 3 wires out from the stator. So I don't know if this was caused when I first started it, because I had never been in here before, so I guess I really had no way of knowing. You wouldn't ever think that it would be put back together this way, but this is kind of one of those things of not knowing kind of what bike you're starting with. So most likely, because those bolts were missing, these wires got pulled, got broken, but this was pretty rusty in here too, so I'm thinking that this was probably left off at some point. Odds are this stator had a problem. Maybe the previous owner took it off, left it off, and then it got all rusted up, and then when they went to sell the bike to me, they just threw it on real quick. So it was probably bad before we even got started, but we didn't do it any favors by running it without it. Long story short, I have a new stator to replace this one with. Here she is. So when I say new stator, I mean new to me stator. I went on eBay and just pulled through a couple of the options, and this is kind of the best one I came up with. This is for a 75. My bike's a 76. I have no reason to think that it won't work, but I guess we'll know in the next half hour or so. As you can see, this one does have the 3 bolts holding it in. Seems to be in really good shape. All of the wires are pretty good. So we have a little bit of electrical tape fixed here. I'll probably pull that off just to verify that it was done decent enough. And then we have the wire that goes to the neutral switch, oil switch, and all the way up to our battery box. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out all the old stuff, and we'll get this one ready to put in. Ended up putting the new stator and field coil into my old housing, just because they did change the outside. You can see how this one just says Honda on it. It has the 3 screw holes. This one doesn't have anything. It has like a separate like Honda thing that screws on or rivets on or somehow. Anyway, I liked the look of the one we had already, and everything else is identical, so I just swapped it over here with a good gasket and everything, and this is basically ready to reinstall. To pull off this old one, like I said, we're just going to get into the wiring. There's basically a little Phillips on top of the oil pressure sensor for that wire, and then there's just a little bullet connector for the neutral switch we can pull out that's right up here. We are ready to go back in reverse order. So now we just make sure all the wires are kind of tucked away properly, and then we can throw in our Allen head bolts for here, throw our case back on, again making sure we don't pinch any wires, making sure nothing's getting down to the chain or anything like that. Then we should be good to go to, like I said, button it all back up, and then I'll probably just get the wiring back to a point to where we can start the bike again. That way we can test and see if this did in fact fix our problem. We got our temporary fuel source hooked back up. Looks like it's flowing in there all right. Still having issues with this number 1 carb. The float's still a little bit sticky. There must be like a little burr or something on there, but it seems to be all right. I gave it a little tap. I'm gonna go ahead and hook up the voltmeter and put it on our battery so I can get a reading as soon as it starts running. Just kind of wedge it in there, something like that maybe, or really got to get like an alligator clip for this thing. Here we go, currently showing 13.3 volts. Alright, see if it starts. Our oil light's on, neutral light's on, so that's good. Let's hit it a few times, get the oil pressure out. Oil pressure went off super quick. Turn the ignition on, chokes on, let's see what happens. Showing 13. Showing 13.1 volts still. Goes up to 13.3 above 2500 RPM, so that's good. So I'm going to kind of let it just idle here for a minute and just make sure our voltage doesn't drop back down. I have no idea how well you guys can hear me, probably not very, but still showing 13.2, so that's a good sign. Sweet. Well, shoot, I'm gonna call that fixed. Last time we definitely would have dropped down well below 13 volts just running it with that amount of time. And as you can see, when I went up in RPM, it went up to about 13 and a half. I think the book says anywhere from like 13 and a half to 14, something like that is fine. I think it's good. If you, again, remember, we are not using the stock voltage regulator. So we can't go exactly what's off of the books. If I'm not mistaken, these new voltage regulators are designed to not overcharge these lithium-ion batteries. So that's probably why it's keeping it pretty consistent. So yeah, I'm gonna call that good. We were lucky enough to fix it with a stator swap. The stator did cost me about 70 bucks on eBay, but it's really not too bad. It's still, I'll go over the full budget with this bike, you know, when we get closer to the end, but it's still doing pretty well. That's going to be it for this video. Charging system is 100% fixed, which is so exciting. Next video, we're going to move on to kind of finalizing all of the electronics. I want to put the rear seat on and see if we want to do a rear fender. Let me know what you guys think of what we should do for that. If you remember, we still modified and need to finish our front fender. Tons of other stuff to do, but honestly, I think if I can get the dent out of that tank pretty soon, we could test ride this bike even before we get the tires swapped, because these tires really aren't that bad. So again, huge thank you to NewAir for sending the fan over. If you guys could please go and click on the link if you're interested in a fan. This thing's legit, just hangs from the wall. It's much better than this crappy old box fan. And if you guys support them, it helps support me. So use that promo code of Octane and get your 15% off your new fan. Follow me on Instagram, check out my website for shirts and all the stuff I say every time. I'll see you guys soon.